So it seems like Jeff Hornacek is on the hot seat with the Knicks. When I Google the guy, when I look him up on Twitter, seems to be a lot of the same thing. Either he's definitely not going to be the coach of this team next season, or there's at least a decent chance of it. There's an anti-Hornacek thing on Twitter. So I got to thinking about just what I think of Jeff Hornacek's performance with the Knicks so far. And I remember saying this on a video, I think a couple months back at this point now. I really didn't like the way that Hornacek handled Porzingis this year, last year. I mean, mainly this year because Melo is gone now. And it's mainly because I don't like how often Porzingis is either posting up or doing his 15-foot face-up game. Now, I'm not saying that Porzingis should never do these things, okay? Because he's 7'3" or whatever he is, and he's great from that area. So I understand that you should run those plays moderately, but it seemed like for a long stretch there, especially when Porzingis was really going off earlier in the season, it seemed like that was almost the only way he was ever scoring, was his back to the basket, having opposing big guys constantly putting their elbows into him, and he's got a thin frame, of course. Or it's him getting the ball on an isolation from around 15 feet. He'll bend over a little bit to shield the ball from the defender, and then he'll rise up real quick and shoot it over him, right? And that thing can work, it can work, but it's like, if I was Hornacek, I would want Porzingis running a few more off-ball plays, getting himself open around the three-point line, because I don't know if there's a power forward or a center who has the combination of speed as well as size to really deal with Porzingis. And if you run off-ball stuff where he's going from one side of the floor to the other, coming across screens, forcing a switch, whatever, and then he goes out to the three-point line or so, or even he does the normal mid-range post-up thing, but you at least try to get a switch beforehand, or you just get the opposing big if they don't want to switch, just a step too slow. That's the kind of thing that can maximize his offensive potential. I mean, to me, he was doing all the great things he was earlier in this season in spite of Hornacek's really basic game plan to get him the ball, okay? I think look at it right now, right? Here's all you need. Porzingis, according to NBA.com, which I think NBA.com is super strict about their post-ups. So for them to consider it a post-up, it really has to be a post-up. According to them, he's getting about 6 post-ups a game, or was. He's shooting 5 threes a game, okay? So it's you take those 6 post-ups back to the basket, you add another 3 to 5 of those mid-range isolation things, and compare that to only 5 threes a game. To me, that's just a mistake. He's also only averaging 4 pick and rolls a game as well. Now, I understand the Knicks point guard situation, it is what it is, but still, really? You're asking your really thin 7'3" dude who can shoot over everyone to shoot mid-range jumpers and post up more than you're wanting him to do off-ball stuff to get open for 3, or relatively open for 3. I mean, with how tall the guy is, he doesn't have to be that open. And you're doing post-ups more than pick and rolls? That's just, So, for his treatment of Porzingis on the floor, I think it's fair to think that Hornacek has not done the best job. Now, of course, he was screwed over by Phil Jackson and the whole triangle offense thing. He was also screwed over by having Carmelo Anthony and Derrick Rose be his 2 primary ball handlers. So I don't think he's done a horrible job, but I think this Knicks team really starts and ends with Porzingis at this point. So for that reason, okay. Now if we look at potential candidates, the one that I like the most is David Fizdale, right? And I go back to these 2 things all the time with Fizdale, but these are the 2 things that really resonated with me. Was number 1, when he wanted to get Mike Conley the ball just more often, give him the first 6 or 7 seconds of the shot clock as opposed to the immediate dump off into the post. And the second thing was playing JaMychal Green over Zach Randolph, favoring more athleticism and perimeter play as opposed to just two brute forces posting up all the time. More spacing and all that good stuff. The other thing with Fizdale is he seems like a guy who can build a culture where everyone holds themselves accountable and they could have more of a tight ship. I'm not saying Hornacek doesn't have that, but Fizdale just seems like a guy who's, he'll get into his players a little more often. He just seems to have that personality. He'll go at the media if he needs to a little bit more. But also, he's only 43. That's kind of younger for a coach. I mean, he's only 2 years older than Brad Stevens is, and he's like 11 years younger than Jeff Hornacek is. He might be able to just connect with young players a bit more, He just seems like a cooler guy than Jeff Hornacek, to put it bluntly. And I think that kind of thing matters when you have a 21-year-old Emmanuel Mudiay and a 20-year-old or 19-year-old Frank Ntilikina and all that. But the other thing is Porzingis himself has shown to have a bit of an attitude, and we remember when he didn't show up for the exit meeting because he was really upset with what the organization was doing with Phil Jackson and everything. So I think it would be good to have a coach like Fizdale, like I mentioned earlier, who can kind of match that energy of Porzingis. Now, there is also Mark Jackson, who I think is similar to Fizdale in that he can connect with the players, and he also has a culture thing that he's good at. He's in like that Doc Rivers, I would even say like Scott Brooks field where, he gets everybody on the same page, he keeps everybody focused, all that type of stuff. My problem with Mark Jackson is his offense sucks, okay? If you remember back in Golden State, now, this was before Draymond emerged, but still, you had Steph Curry, you had Klay Thompson. I mean, those two alone just can get your offense to top 10 by existing. But all Mark Jackson wanted to do was run pick and rolls and isolations. It wasn't until Steve Kerr came in there and they actually started moving the ball around and doing off-ball stuff and flare screens and all that. I mean, that was really what catapulted the Warriors' offense, that, and of course Draymond Green coming out of nowhere. So, I don't know, I fear that everything that Hornacek was doing with Porzingis, we'd get the same thing with Mark Jackson, which is like, just throw the ball into the post and let him get beat up by opposing centers all day, and then he'll get hurt at game 50 again. Look, I don't want Porzingis to be another LaMarcus Aldridge, okay? Porzingis has the opportunity to be some incredible offensive talent, and I don't want him shooting a million turnaround jumpers for two-pointers all day long. Now, there is Jeff Van Gundy. I will admit, when he was last coaching, which was for the Rockets in the mid-2000s, I wasn't totally into the NBA, and if I was nowhere near, caring about it enough to make note of what his play style was and all that stuff. But what I will say is, based on like what I've heard from him sometimes on the broadcast booth and other times in podcasts, it does seem like he has kind of updated his style just in the way he talks about the game to make sense with the modern day. So if he's able to realize like, okay, don't dump the ball down like you still have Patrick Ewing all the time, then okay. I mean, I would think I would be okay with Jeff Van Gundy. I've heard that Jerry Stackhouse is also a candidate. I mean, here's one thing for you. His G League team, the Toronto 905, who are 30-18 right now, are currently shooting 36 threes a game in the month of March, where they are 5-1, with a plus-minus of 11. I mean, that seems like a thing, right? I know they've had one kid who's like the Steph Curry of the G League, essentially, for the last couple of years. I don't know. I mean, it's tough to see all these guys. I would say, just based on what I've seen in the NBA, my pick would be Fizdale, as long as he's ready and committed to be on a long thing. Another one that I have at least like kind of thought about a little bit was David Blatt. The thing with him is, you hope that he's just not a wimp who can't handle the New York thing, because he was a wimp with LeBron James. But in terms of X's and O's, like, Blatt's good, right? Like, they were going to run some like Princeton offense which I believe means like a lot of off-ball cuts before LeBron just said, "This is stupid, just give me the ball." I think that's like shows that he has a mind for getting kind of weird with offense. I don't know. He might not be able to handle New York. Who knows, man? I think Fizdale would be better than Hornacek. But whoever they hire, they have to be able to handle everything New York City. Being able to connect with younger players would help, but it's not a necessity, I guess. And, I mean, I think, I said it here, I think Porzingis has been used incorrectly. And he's been able to do everything he's doing, despite the fact that he's been put in some pretty bad offensive situations. So, we'll see what happens.